Hey everyone, I wanted to make a quick announcement to let you know that I will be in Louisville for the next couple of weeks. I am currently in the Albuquerque airport, if you couldn't tell, and I have this unfortunate table near this light that is giving me a shinier head than usual, but we'll just deal with that. I did want to let you know again, though, that I will be traveling to Louisville. I'm taking part in the AP grading process, so something I do often in the summers. Um, if you want to know more about that, you can ask me. The point I want to make, though, is that I will be slightly less available than usual. My work there has me busy from 8 to 5 Eastern Time. I will be continuing to work on our class together, though, so please keep sending emails or text messages whenever you have questions. It just may be that I don't get back to you until the evening, rather than more immediately, as I tried to do. Also, I wanted to leave a couple of kind of parting thoughts about our What is History discussion. I always enjoy reading your ideas about how to define history, about what is important as we study the past, and kind of emphasizing the reality that despite our best efforts at objectivity, and I'm not saying we shouldn't strive for it, it's impossible to achieve. Simply because we are human beings studying human activities that took place in the past with a very imperfect historical record. And so I've mentioned in a few comments to you in grading on Blackboard things about the historical record. Essentially, what I'm talking about there is the overall body of sources and knowledge that we currently have about any given past event. That's the historical record. And of course, there are gaps in it. There are perspectives that are missing, there are documents that were either destroyed or ideas that were never written down that we just simply don't have. And so historians do our best to try to get at the perspectives of folks who either didn't leave records behind or left records behind that were mediated through others. An example of that, of what I mean by that, is I'm thinking of a study of microhistory that I've been reading recently by Carlo Ginzburg, and he writes about a miller in 16th century Italy using Inquisition records. The problem with Inquisition records is we'll get a tiny bit of a taste of and experience with in New Mexico history is, of course, that people who faced the Inquisition were under duress. They were often tortured. They were not speaking freely. They were not expressing their ideas. And so historians have a number of ways of applying historical thinking skills to read between the lines, to think about what are some of the details of this account that, although under duress, provide information that is accurate, that is factual, and might help us get at what life was like for folks from the Miller class, for example, in that example. There are similar processes of trying to reconstruct indigenous histories using oral histories and other kinds of sources, and that's something that we're already looking at in Unit 2, as I know many of you have been reading and posting reading tweets already. Finally, we all need to keep in mind, and many of us pointed this out in our comments about what history is that all sources contain bias. Bias is often used as a sort of negative term. It has a negative connotation, I think, in the way that we often think about it and use it. Um, we need to realize, though, that it just is. It's a reality, a fact of life, as we study any kind of information, but especially historical information. And usually when we're talking about bias, we're talking about someone's perspective. What skin did they have in the game? What axe did they have to grind? To use a couple of those old cliche metaphor kind of things. Um, but we have to, again, think about what stake did they have in writing about whatever it is that they're writing about. What perspectives do they bring to the event? What kinds of biases then do they have? What things aren't they telling us? Of course, someone like Governor Othermene, who we'll read about in connection with the Pueblo Revolt, did not want to make himself seem like a weak leader who had lost New Mexico to a bunch of Native people, and trying to make himself not seem weak. The kinds of reports that he made, although having to admit, of course, that he had been forced from Santa Fe, had to admit things like that while still trying to say, these are the great things that I've been doing, these are the problems with the Pueblo people, essentially laying all the blame for the situation on them. And so, again, we get a very skewed account in terms of what was going on, but those accounts are still important, as we'll see. I won't belabor that point, but I really just wanted to emphasize the fact that primary sources often can contain the most bias for the reasons that I was just talking about. Secondary accounts have their biases, they have their certain perspectives, their different methodologies, but they usually try to give us a fuller picture than what we'll get from a single primary source because they have looked at multiple primary sources. So that's why, as we study the past, that's exactly what we need to be doing. We need to be thinking about multiple perspectives, how many we can possibly get, and thinking about all of those things critically. So hopefully all of that sets us up for a very good summer semester, thinking about how the kinds of questions we ask might shape the kinds of answers that we get as we study New Mexico history, so that we can be careful to ask open-ended questions as we're reading, as we're talking with each other on Twitter or posting to the timeline. Again, think about the ways in which the questions you're asking, the focus that you have, is shaping the kinds of responses that you're writing. And maybe try to include more and different types of perspectives. All right, I'll leave it there. Again, I'll be in Louisville for a couple of weeks. If you have any questions about my comments and feedback that I left you in the grading section in Blackboard, don't hesitate to ask. Also, I did pose some questions in that grading feedback. You don't have to answer them. They're just kind of to get you to think about certain things. But if you did want to answer them and send me an email or post on Twitter about it, that would be great too. So I hope you are having a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.